Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, I'm standing up here because I had to shut my door. Forgot to shut my door. This is the Digital Asset Investor, and I want to start with my Glint code. This thing is good until July the 30th. They are one of my sponsors. They've got a referral code here where you can get 50% off vaulting and insurance fees for the next 12 months. These guys allow you to buy gold in their app. You have a Glint MasterCard debit card. You can literally spend your gold. You can spend it on margaritas and cheese dip, which is what I do occasionally. But in this age of corruption that we're in, I mean, it's a great thing. It's not a bank account. It's separate from all that. So for me, it's just adds one more level of protection for myself is the way I look at it. Now, Stuart Alderati was on CoinDesk and had a lot of interesting things to say. Listen to this.
But I think if you look at the defenses and the narrative around what some of the actors who are now on the wrong side of the V with the SEC, they are reading from the Ripple playbook, and that is perfectly fine with us.
Well, on that topic, we must bring up the two recent lawsuits that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, the SEC versus Coinbase and Binance. You're expecting a result in your case, I think, by the end of September. How do you think that the result of the Ripple case or even the revelation of the Hinman documents might be of aid to Coinbase or Binance as they fight their own legal battle?
Look, I think transparency is an important thing. I think that it is really disheartening as a lawyer, as an American, that we have a regulatory agency that is fighting so hard to hide the truth and using, again, deliberate creation of confusion and chaos as a weapon. They weaponize regulation by enforcement. So anything that can shine a bright light on the SEC's tactics here, I think is a very good thing. I think exposing that the SEC themselves identified a regulatory gap in the space that they themselves understood they probably didn't have the authority to fill is a really important revelation. People forget sometimes that these agencies only have the power that is granted to them by Congress, and they answer to Congress. They can create law. They have to apply the law, and they have to apply the law faithfully, and the SEC has woefully failed to do that. So I think that will give other industry players that now find themselves in a courtroom with the SEC a leg up to start with. And obviously, the substantive application of the law is very, very important. And as we get clarity in the courts, I think the knock-on effects of that will prove to be beneficial to others who find themselves in this position.
Now, the other thing that's going on that I think, I don't know that it was missed, but I want to make sure I highlight it here. Look at this. This is a Stuart Alderati email where he says an investigation must be conducted to understand what or who influenced Hinman, why conflicts, or at the very least appearances of conflicts were ignored, and why the SEC touted the speech knowing that it would create greater confusion. My question is, why is Congress, and here he is in this video saying that, or they said that he's calling for an investigation, right?
We have Stuart Alderati, Chief Legal Officer at Ripple. He's now calling for an investigation after the release of the much anticipated Hinman documents earlier this week. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Oh, happy to be here.
All right, so this is something John Deaton's been calling for a long time, and Empower and Jason Foster have also been calling for an investigation. And the question is, why is nobody, all these guys who are supposedly the good guys, Patrick McHenry, Tom Emmer, Warren Davidson, Representative Bill Huizenga, why are none of you calling for an investigation? And all of you should retweet this tweet and copy in your congressman and ask them why they're not calling for an investigation. Remember, my understanding, I'm no attorney, but my understanding is once a congressman calls for an investigation, that is what would give John Deaton and some of these guys their dream, which is subpoena power. That's my understanding. But again, I'm not an attorney. I think that's what I heard John Deaton say at one point. He can confirm that. Now, the next thing we get is this. This is unbelievable. Think about everything that you and I as XRP holders have been through, and nobody ever gave a rip whether or not you and I were being hurt as investors. Gary Gensler didn't, Jay Clayton didn't, the SEC did not. They just dropped the lawsuit. They were even warned. Jay Clayton was warned by Joseph Grunfest how it would hurt investors. He didn't care. None of them cared. But now JP Morgan says Ethereum could be put into the other category. They'll create a special category just so that Ethereum investors don't get hurt. They say it right here. U.S. lawmakers could put Ether into a new other category to avoid classifying it as a security, but to protect investors. So now all of a sudden they want to protect investors. But it's not the investors that they're worried about, folks. It's the disguised whale investors that they're trying to protect. And those are the ones we want to know. That's why part of the reason we need an investigation. We need to find out who they are. It says the comments come after release of the Hinman documents earlier this week as a part of an ongoing enforcement lawsuit against Ripple Labs. And if you're wondering if this is just maybe that's just some rogue JP Morgan guy that thinks they might do this. Well, no. It's actually a narrative. It's a new narrative that's forming here. And guess who is going to reinforce that narrative? That's correct. The CEO of Promethium. Right here.
Is Ether a commodity or a security?
Without speaking to anyone.
I know you've repeatedly said you're not going to speak to one, except you've spoken to one, Bitcoin. So I'm asking you to speak to a second one, the second largest market cap here.
I thought it was very telling, when Chairman Gensler testified in the House Financial Services Committee, and one of the first committee members, I believe it was the chairperson, said, is Ethereum a security? And then people got upset because Chairman Gensler didn't answer. But the reality is, if he answers one way or another, basically he either knocks off half the market cap of ETH in a day, or he shoots it up the other way. I thought it was actually probably responsible not to be all of a sudden make some sort of incredibly influential statement in a public hearing that will potentially affect a lot of the holders of Ethereum. I think it was actually admirable that.
Let me rephrase for you what he just said. What he just said is similar to what Bill Hinman said in his Ethereum Free Pass speech, setting aside the fact that Ethereum's a security, or was born as a security. To sue them would be to harm investors. Well, guess what, CEO of Promethium? Setting aside the fact that you might think XRP is a security, why didn't you give two rats behinds about XRP investors? You didn't care, Bill Hinman didn't care, Jay Clayton didn't care, Gary Gensler didn't care, the SEC didn't care, JP Morgan didn't care, none of you cared. But you all of a sudden care because it's not about the Ethereum investors, it's about the disguised whale investors. And who are those? I have my guesses, but I think we need an investigation so we can find out. Well, Adam Cochran, .eth, who's an Ethereum guy, all of a sudden, these guys want to do some sleuthing because it affects them in some kind of way. This a Promethium story. He says this Promethium story gets even better. So they started in 2017. They filled their Reg A Plus and aimed to raise $50 million. But how did these random lawyers supposedly get approval from the SEC and FINRA? Look no further than their team, including Rosemary Fanelli, who worked for the NICE and FINRA, John Tornatore from the CBOE, Joseph Zangri, from the SEC, Chief Compliance Officer, he's from the SEC. And then he goes, shows some other things, but I just wanted to show you that. And then I just wanted to float out a question here, because we know Vitalik Buterin literally slept on the Ripple couch and got all kinds of great ideas from Stefan Thomas over at Ripple, right when they were talking about Codius and smart contracts and all that stuff, and then Vitalik leaves and creates Ethereum. So what I'm wondering here is, did he really want to? Remember, the thing was that his visa, he couldn't get a visa or something like that. So my question is, did he really want to be an intern at Ripple, or was he there for another reason? Because he was the chief scientist at Wang Zhang Blockchain Labs. Wang Zhang is the same company that owns 20% of Promote Ethereum, otherwise known as Promethium. Okay? Same guys that are touting what Gary Gensler says now. I couldn't do this show today without showing you this. What's funny about this is that when I saw this guy, I literally said, that looks just like the bad guy with the ponytail from one of the Karate Kid movies. And XRPP seems to be on my wavelength. One time he told me that he was a huge Phil Hendry, the radio show fan, of which I am too. Major, if you've never checked out Phil Hendry, that's PhilHendrie. Unbelievable talent in radio. But he was a Phil Hendry fan, and I think he's also a fan of some of the things I grew up on, including the Karate Kid, and so he saw it too. That is so funny. Eleanor Terrett, new House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry has just announced 2 SEC oversight hearings next Thursday, June 22nd. I say this to Patrick McHenry. That's all fine and good. You've had hearings. I know you're a good guy, but guess what? It's time to call for an investigation of the Hinman. And while you're at it, you ought to call for an investigation of this Promote Ethereum company and their ties to China. That's what you ought to be doing. Here's Patrick McHenry. Your move, Gary Gensler. The SEC must not pick winners and losers based on inconsistent factors. I'll be watching closely. This is BlackRock applying for a Bitcoin ETF. I've always said that that it's going to be a Goldman Sachs or a JP Morgan or a BlackRock who gets that Bitcoin ETF. It's not going to be one of the little players. Caitlin Long says, if the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF application is approved before all other pending Bitcoin ETF applications at the SEC, you would conclude that the U.S. is, and the answer is corrupt, 81.4%. John Deaton pointed an interesting thing out from the Hinman document release. According to the transcript, Stuart Alderati was present and listening during the Hinman deposition. I found the moment where he spit out his coffee. Bill Hinman, quote, with respect to Ethereum, one of the things that was somewhat compelling was it was fairly transparent. Well, Bill, I got news for you. Joseph Lubin called it internal transparency, and I believe that means no transparency at all. Real transparency was only performed by Ripple. Quarterly reports, escrow, what you see is what you get. Then John Deaton put this one out. Hinman was asked, did you have communications with anyone other than SEC staff about the substance of your remarks in June 14th, 2018 speech before you gave it? His answer is no, not on the substance. That is a lie. And let me show you what else. I want to remind you, folks, this is old Lowell Ness. Remember, Lowell Ness was Andreessen Horowitz's attorney. And a lot of people forgot this, but in all of their arrogance, Lowell Ness, he doubled down and actually came out and admitted that he sat across from Hinman, and that Hinman told him he was going to accept his safe harbor for guidance.
My playbook these days, in fact, honestly, ever since I sat across from Bill Hinman and he sort of said, we're going to accept your proposal to give some guidance here, I stopped giving guidance. I said, let's be consistent with the SEC's hand wave approach here, because that's who matters. When you get into court, like the court's going to give.
They stopped giving guidance. Andreessen Horowitz and all of them, none of them cared. From 2018 until we uncovered ETHgate, none of them cared about regulations. And the reason they didn't care is because they thought they had their Bitcoin Ethereum monopoly. That's why they didn't care. That's the translation.
To the regulator. Nobody wants to. I mean, I get that. I really do. In my heart is
they thought that they thought that was going to be the entire market. That's why you're seeing right now they're still trying to come up with rationalizations. Their new one is that they don't want investors to be hurt, so they need to put Ethereum in an other category. It's all been to try to create a monopoly for Ethereum and Bitcoin.
I love the academic arguments about whether or not something should be a security, but I just think, honestly, to be pragmatic here, you should just treat it like security and be done with it and move on, because we all know how to do that. And so that's, to me, the path of least resistance right now.
I don't think it's a coincidence that he's got a full beard and looks like he's a little depressed either. I would be depressed if all of the video of him had been, if it was me, I'd be a little depressed. I might be growing a beard out and hiding in my house too, because what they've done here is shameful. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tell your friends and family that not only are the sleuths at work, but there's a bunch of new sleuths who are copying our XRP community sleuth business model. I say welcome to the party. It's Friday. Thanks for listening.